Hi. So thanks to Katie Lounge for inviting Studio LIN to give this presentation. I'm not sure how many people are out there, but maybe we should wait a little bit longer. Looks like there's 23 people, 24. Great. So I'm just going to begin here. Basically, Studio LIN has been around for about a little more than 10 years now. We've been working out of New York, recently moved to Brooklyn before this COVID crisis began. So here we are on the map. You see we're kind of in West Brooklyn. What you see here up here is Manhattan here. This is what it looks like from on top of our studio. So lately it's just been me in the studio by myself. Stephanie Tam has been working from California, and we have other collaborators in New York and other places as well. Can you guys hear me okay? So a lot of our clients are architects or other artists like photographers, and so a lot of the projects are kind of run pretty smoothly. I would say there's a close collaboration. The clients often understand things like typography, color, scale, things like that, so we don't have to kind of teach them as much. So the first project I'm going to talk about is things that we've done for the OMA New York office. So OMA is a kind of global architecture office founded by Rem Koolhaas. And so they have offices all over the world. So Shohei and Jason head up the New York office here, and what you see him doing here is giving a lecture. About 8 years ago, no, I would say 5 years ago, they asked us to help them make print publications to document their projects internally. So one of the issues was that it was really hard to get time with the partners because they're extremely busy, obviously, with their projects all around the world. So one kind of big issue was trying to understand OMA without a lot of time with their partners. So the thing that we kind of ultimately turned to was YouTube. We found that Shohei here, he's one of the founders of OMA New York. He has given, I would say, almost hundreds of lectures throughout the US and all over the world. And by watching his lectures, we were able to really understand their working method, the way they think, all about their key projects. So these lectures became a really important source of information to understand the office without much time with talking to them one-on-one. So the project was at first to make a series of print-on-demand publications, and we came up with kind of two overarching qualities that we use to kind of guide us when we design things for them. So one of the qualities was this idea of brutal plus beautiful. It sounds ridiculous, but we call it Brutiful, which is a no-frills design with a focus on communicating effectively. And the second quality was rigorous. So it being very systematic, allowing for a maximum amount of content and information. So they really liked density. So basically with these two qualities, we kind of embarked on this project of designing these things for them. The OMA New York office has a lot of different projects going on all at the same time. So you see here is the kind of like internal Excel list of all their projects. And so they kept on showing us this, and we thought it was probably the clearest way to communicate projects as well as status, where they're located, what category they're in. So we kind of just took that and just kind of like stripped it down to Arial, which is their kind of standard typeface. And we kind of organized this a little bit more. And then we started making these internal project documents. So each of these booklets contained one project from the office. So we kind of made up these kind of cover pages. The typography is all just using Arial regular weight. We added these building representations onto each of the covers. So in this case, when the building is completed, it's a black kind of symbol icon. And if the building is unbuilt or in progress or a competition, then it's kind of this like light gray. And so we started establishing these kind of booklet covers based on this kind of like really simple rules. So unbuilt things had like a almost white icon on top. In progress projects were light gray, and then the build projects were black. So basically, like from across the room, you can tell what each of these booklets are about. So going back to the lectures that we watched of the partners talking about their projects, kind of oftentimes over and over again, we basically just took the lecture slides and transcribed what the partners said about each slide. So that became the content for the booklet. So no one really had to write or edit anything. We had content just kind of straight away just by taking the PowerPoint presentations. So this is an example of a booklet for the FINA project, which is the series of buildings in Miami. So the booklets were really simple, kind of modest things. And then on the back of each booklet was kind of this overview of all the images within that booklet. So these are examples of 3 different booklets for 3 different projects. These booklets could then be compiled into a larger booklet through just wire binding. So when you compile a series of booklets, you just kind of write the date and what time they were compiled. The back of these compilations showed the projects within each of these booklets. So these are just some images of the printed result here. These were all printed digitally. And then so these are individual project booklets, and then this is showing them wire bound together. So this is like a booklet, a compilation of projects. One detail that we were kind of excited about was each of these booklets were just kind of wired through. So the booklets would kind of retain they're sort of like signatures, but they're kind of wire bound together. So after we made all these booklets documenting maybe 20 or 30 different projects, they asked us to kind of think about a kind of book, a larger book, we can call it a monograph, of their work that spanned over 10 years. So we embarked on this project of kind of making a real kind of book for them. So this is one of the sketches for the book cover. So moving on to the book, we wanted to see if this idea of kind of using the slideshow, the PowerPoint presentation content, seeing if we could use that as a base to create a monograph. And so oftentimes it's, for something as important as a kind of architecture book monograph, you need to kind of be really convincing to kind of convince them of your idea for their entire book. So once again, we were just kind of watched a lot of the YouTube videos again. And there was one, at the end of one YouTube video, Shohei, a partner at OMA, was he was receiving questions from audience members. So one audience member said, I was fortunate enough to attend the interviews for the Albright Knox, and I was really struck by the volume of work that you brought to that interview. I'm wondering if that was typical, or if you took a calculated guess as to how much this particular client was interested in seeing your process, or do you think that clients choose you because they want to participate to that level? And Cho's response was, that was a pure reflection of our excitement and actual process. We are just greedy. We did so much study, we'd rather show it. That kind of mentality rather than any sophisticated reason regarding the sheer volume of work, a simulation of working with OMA, exposing the process to the maximum level. So we really held on to this idea of like the monograph exposing the process to the maximum level. So what does that mean? Typically in a traditional monograph, you have a ton of content which then gets highly edited down and ultimately becomes the book, right? In this case, we were kind of presenting this idea that you start with this kind of PowerPoint presentation content, and then you keep on adding as much content as possible to create this kind of complex and open-ended story about each project. So you see this simple diagram, basically a limited amount of content goes in and you expand it, you keep on adding to it, which ultimately results in the book. So just going back to one of the last renderings for the book that we made. And so a bit about these kind of renderings, we take a lot of time to make these kind of, InDesign drawings to be as kind of real as possible, because we find that the finished product often looks exactly like our renderings. So the more time we spend making these kind of visualizations, the more we can understand what the final thing will look like. So we often spend a lot of time doing these kind of like three-dimensional drawings. So going back to the book, so these are some initial sketches for the book, and they start to illustrate this this idea of extreme density. So of course you have your kind of large full bleed images of the project. You have your kind of drawings, technical drawings. And then you go into this section which again are based on PowerPoint presentation slides that have been transcribed. So you see this kind of extreme density representation of the projects. And so this goes back to this idea of exposing the process to the maximum, like really showing people like what is involved in the kind of design and building of these structures. So you also see the image sizes are all quite small. So which was really amazing because we literally can use any image. Like even if it's like a really bad, super low resolution image, it doesn't matter because it only prints like 3 inches wide. So that kind of solved the issue of like bad images. Also because we kind of include every kind of image without trying to make them look nice, it kind of freed us up to just like purely communicate what the project was about instead of spending all this time like picking the best image or things like that. So this project began maybe 3 years ago, and so if you imagine 20 projects, each project having about 20 pages of these extremely dense story of each project, it creates a ton of work. So we the only way to kind of manage this process was making we actually made like a spreadsheet. So these are the projects, and then each time it went back and forth between our offices. We just shared the InDesign files back and forth to edit and things like that. So each time we kind of like marked off our initials on who worked on it and whether things are done. So this allowed us to keep track of the entire book. And then ultimately, we printed, I think we only printed about 300 copies of this OMA New York monograph. And this is the actual thing. So for the book, it has a kind of PVC cover with a silver silk screen on top of a kind of highly textured silver book cloth. All the type is Arial in three sizes. So there's like the full bleed images, and then there come the kind of really dense project images. Another note was that basically each little image had a number attached to it. So so you see back here, these numbers refer to when each project begins and ends. So if you look at the bottom of the page here in the layout, this is thumbnail images 25 through 37, and then 38 through 47, and so on. Another kind of technical thing that we did was we printed these thumbnail pages 5/5. So we added we replaced the standard magenta ink with the fluorescent magenta ink. So that allowed things such as highlights to really pop off the page. So this kind of density of layout really allowed us to show how much kind of experimentation and model making and prototyping and iterations the OMA office actually does. So for every project, there's at least hundreds of models made to explore different structures and shapes for every building. So we're currently working on a published version of this book, and it should be out towards the end of next year. The next project I'm going to be going through is a book for John Edmonds, who's a photographer. So we've been working with a publisher called Capricious for the last few years, and every year they give a photo prize to a kind of a photographer, and as part of that prize, the photographer gets a book published by Capricious. And oftentimes that book is the first kind of real kind of serious book that these photographers have the opportunity to make. So John Edmonds won the Capricious Prize, I think, about 2 years ago. And so we were awarded the project of making his kind of first real photo book. So here I'm jumping straight to the end result. So towards the beginning, we always like, as much as possible, we like to kind of have discussions with the photographer, find out what they like and what they don't like, what their kind of aspirations for the book are, and so on. In our beginning conversations, we often ask things as simple and dumb as like, you know, what kind of colors are you into and things like that. And he kept on mentioning he liked gold. And, you know, at first we were quite worried. How do you incorporate gold without it being kind of like, you know, overly pretentious or something like that? Ultimately, we came across this really weird material. It was like a kind of silk, very smooth book cloth, and the material was made in Taiwan. And we really liked it, but we were kind of also worried that if we didn't do the right thing on the gold, it would feel like just kind of like too blingy or something. And ultimately, we thought it'd be really nice to kind of take his photos and reproduce them on the cover in this kind of like rougher way. So these are photos that are kind of, they're actually foil stamped onto this gold cloth material. And you know, at first the printer was like, look, like we've never really foil stamped on top of foil stamp on top of this material. So we, you know, he's like, I don't know if it's gonna work. And ultimately he tried it and it did work. So the image on the bottom is a white foil stamp with a black foil stamp on top of that. And then the image on top is just a blue foil stamp. So ultimately it worked. We're really happy about that. This is a little close-up. These are some interior spreads. So with photo books, predominantly, you know, 80 to 90% of the book are photos, obviously. And so with the kind of additional kind of 10 to 15%, you're dealing with text, and you're dealing with like an index perhaps, and you're dealing with like perhaps an interview. And so those are the kind of like little places where we really like to play, because of the rest of the book needs to be, you know, straight representation of the photos. So in John's case, we created this kind of like visual index in the back, you know, with information about the year and the title of each photo. And then there's this interview at the back as well. The last section where we have this kind of like weird photo layout came from John himself. So as part of our research, Instagram's provided a ton of information when we're trying to find out about artists, or just kind of like really trying to see what they're like as people, what they choose to present to the world. We often turn to Instagram to kind of find inspiration. So in this case, we went back to an installation that he did at the Columbus Museum, and it showed this like really interesting layout of his photos, which he kind of composed. And we really liked the kind of weird symmetry of this layout. So we picked up on that, and that's how we came up with these kind of layouts for the index. And it's also how we kind of arrived at this kind of symmetrical, kind of weird layout for the cover. So all these things, we're always looking for inspiration directly from each artist to kind of make design decisions as much as possible. After we did the book, we did John's website. And so one kind of key idea for John's website is that it doesn't really show photos kind of like as like single digital files. We're always showing his photos as kind of artifacts, as objects in the world. So what you're seeing here they're all installation shots. His website just automatically starts scrolling up when you go to it. If you roll over a caption, it pauses the page. So it's a way to kind of stop the movement. So here you're seeing the website. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit through it. So again, it's always showing his work as physical objects in space, not just kind of JPEGs. And then there's an information page when you roll over his name. And then at the very bottom, you get this index of work. And we really like this idea that you can't just, like, obviously if you do a Google search, you can get bigger images of his work, but when it's presented here, you only get this kind of little thumbnail, little tiny thumbnail of each image. So after we did the book and the website for New York Art Book Fair, he wanted to create this poster as a kind of like giveaway. And so we turned to a newspaper printing press. And what's amazing about the newspaper printing press is the kind of how fast you can print things, and also how cheaply things can be printed at scale. So in addition to that, it's always just like magical to see how these machines work. It's really cool. And then so whenever we do these prints at the newspaper printing press, we always have to be there physically. It's because the color, controlling color on these presses is extremely difficult. So oftentimes I'm there for 1 or 2 hours to just kind of adjust the color levels on the printouts. And it takes a really long time, but ultimately I think it's worth it. So here you see the press guys, and I'm trying to tell them which of these versions is better and why, and what they need to do. For example, like, okay, you need to bump up the cyan, you need to bump up the magenta, you have to add more black, you have to, there's a multitude of things that you can do to make the image better. So here, this is a good comparison. On the left side, I thought the image lacked contrast and it needed more red. So they adjusted the press, they ran it again, and then on the right side, you see how much of a difference that makes. So by adding black and red, you have a kind of richer image. And this was the final result. So John created this poster as part of this award that he won, and so as part of the award he got to have anything he wanted on the side of this huge building. So this is the poster. I would say it's, I don't know, 50 feet tall on the side of a building. So it was really amazing to see this work so large. Okay, So the next project is called Surveillance Index, and basically this project was kind of one of these lucky things where you have one client, he's asking for something really simple, and then he's letting you do almost whatever you want. So in this case, the client is Mark Gunheim, and he's a photo book collector. And he has this huge collection of photo books, but they're all related to surveillance. So he's specifically interested in surveillance as a kind of topic and subject matter. So he's collected hundreds of books. And being a book lover, he wanted to make a book himself about his books. So we created this thing called the Surveillance Index. And so what we did was we took, we limited the index to 100 books. So he picked out 100 of what he considered the most important surveillance-related photo books. And we picked one spread from every book, and we created this new book from the 100 books. So as you go through the book, one spread from each book is produced at full scale. So as you're flipping through the book, you're flipping through 100 different surveillance-related photo books. So, and obviously each photo book is a different size and a different subject matter, but it gives this kind of weird story. And then we basically indexed, we had a description written of each book. We have these kind of large text sections that just show all 100 books, organized by title, by ISBN number, and etc. By size. After we did the book, we made the website for the project. And so this is sort of like the kind of most direct translation of the book you can do for a website. So it literally takes all the same images, all the same content, and kind of puts them into a website form. A couple years after the book came out, Label, I think they're in a Paris-based photo bookstore / museum, asked us to do an exhibition based on the book. So what was really fortunate was that the book already collected 100 photo books. So then the museum just had to acquire these 100 books, and then they'd have an exhibition. So as part of that exhibition, we came up with these kind of really huge oversized bookmarks that numbered each of the books. So you could refer to the surveillance index for information about each of the books. So for example, like book number 4, you would just open the surveillance index and look at book number 4, and you have all the information. We needed to create this kind of poster for the exhibition, and so we asked David Brandon Geating, who did all 100 books with these giant bookmarks. And then you see these kind of like curator people, these helper people that kind of get the books down for you to look at. The next series of projects that I'm going to talk about are for MOS. They're an architecture firm based in Manhattan, and it's run by Michael and Hillary here, pictured here in front of their models and materials. So this kind of collaboration began a couple years ago, and ever since we started working with them, we've been kind of consistently making print things and exhibitions, and whatever we can make, we make. In the very beginning, we looked at these kind of quote-unquote rules, these kind of things that MOS as architects kind of think about. So rule number 2 was construct methodologies around problems of non-composition, seriality, aggregation, ready-mades, the vernacular, the banal, the boring. So it's exploring this idea of these kind of things that are like vernacular, ready-mades, the banal, and the boring as a way to arrive at something new. Number 6, repeat things one after another. So produce specificity that starts with collective sameness instead of individual expressive difference. So we really like these rules, number 2 and number 6, and we wanted to see what we could do graphically to kind of like explore these rules. So obviously the first thing you need to start with is a typeface, and we knew it had to be a kind of sans serif because they're just kind of like really kind of modern geometric work. And we picked accidents, grotesque, only because Michael thought the name was really funny. It is really funny. I'm not sure why it's called accidents, but it was reason enough to just go with this typeface because the name was really funny. So we took original OG accidents, grotesque. We made the capital letters all about 3% smaller. You can see here the A and the G getting smaller. And then we tracked it 30. So that was it. That was the identity. And then we chose to always use MOS accidents, grotesque for everything that they did. And that was that. So this is kind of this overview of all the different things that we've done, just a few things. And you see, basically it's really type-based. There's not much else going on. And generally, we're trying to do things as kind of straightforward and sort of like dumb as possible. A lot of times we're relying on MOS's kind of writing to make things interesting, or we're trying to rely on some kind of idea other than like graphics to make things worth looking at or interesting. So one example of that is this tote bag here. MOS had this exhibition at Princeton University. Marathon. I feel like I'm just like talking to myself. But anyway, so MOS had an exhibition of these really long and some would say extremely boring videos. And so they also had a budget to kind of promote this exhibition of their videos. So we chose to use the budget on tote bags. And basically, there's a guard at the exhibition, so he kind of sees what is going on. And if you sit there and if you watch all the videos, if the guard saw you sit there and watch all the extremely boring videos, then you would get a tote bag. So that was the idea for this tote bag, and it's sort of like bribing people to watch videos. The working process here is sort of the opposite of OMA, where with OMA it feels a little more like impersonal because the partners are not very accessible, they're very busy. With MOS, I would consider it like really collaborative because we're often I'm just texting Michael and we're kind of designing over text. The design is so simple. It's accidents, our custom accidents. There's nothing really to talk about with the design or the typography because we both know what it's going to look like. So we're oftentimes we're talking about like materials and sizes and just like really simple stuff. And we often do it through text. So it's kind of this advantage of really making the graphics sort of super easy. So here's some of the things that we've made for them. These are these kind of print-on-demand booklets, and these originally were with Lulu, which is kind of the big print-on-demand service. And so the problem with Lulu is that they screw up the color a lot, and if you try and put something on the spine, it's always misaligned. So you want things on the spine to be centered, but it's never centered. So so we kind of took all the possible pitfalls out of the design. You can never have anything on the spine because they'll screw up the printing of the spine. You can never have a full color image on the cover because the color is always screwed up. So we kind of eliminated those two things. And solid colors they do really well, so that's what we kind of chose to do. The inside of the booklets are really easy. They're all black and white. They're all using, I think these booklets were all one type size. And the layouts, the only thing we're thinking about is making them as kind of easy and dumb as possible. This book I'll talk about later, but it's this really huge 1,000+ page book. And then we also make like really big books. So this thing is, I don't know, like 2.5 feet tall. We make fun stuff. This is that tote bag, the kind of video, the bribery thing. This is the website. Basically, it's a list. It's really simple. I think it's all one type size, and in the spirit of MOS stuff. Okay, so this is this giant book. It's called An Unfinished Encyclopedia of Scale Figures Without Architecture. So what does that mean? In architectural renderings, people have scale figures in there just to show how big the building or the structure is in relation to people. So every architecture office has their own style of these kind of drawings, these people. And so what MOS did was they collected these figures, they stripped out all the architecture, and they were only left with figures. And they made this alphabetical encyclopedia of mostly really well-known architects throughout the ages, and created this encyclopedia of different figures, all without architecture. So this was a huge undertaking. I mean, it's like 1,400 something pages, and so the process for this was this kind of passing the file back and forth between our offices. And at that time, Paul, who's an architect who was at MOS, was kind of like the resident book person, InDesign person. And so we would create these templates, pass them to their office, and then Paul would work on filling it out, and then he would pass it back to us to kind of refine the type. And ultimately, I found that Paul was better at InDesign than I was, and found kind of like newfound respect for architects as kind of book designers, because he's really amazing. Another project, this time an exhibition at Princeton. How long have I been talking for? Oh my God, almost an hour. Okay. So this exhibition was called Low Resolution Houses, and it was an exhibition on kind of houses from contemporary architects. And so there were 44 houses in the show. As part of most exhibitions that we work on, there's always this kind of social media promotional stuff. So we like to make videos for that. So these are obviously squares that can go on Instagram. This is an image of the finished exhibition. And so again, it's 44 houses, and the houses are all made of paper, and they're on these paper plinths that are the kind of exact size of the plan of each house. So our involvement was primarily this kind of crazy huge curtain, which contained the names of the houses as well as like information about the exhibition. So here you see the curtain. All the type is actually I'll go through it later, but it's ironed on, this black curtain. It's crazy. So here the exhibition was at Princeton. The students in the architecture school made the scale models out of paper. And then this giant curtain. So the idea was that all the walls of the exhibition space, except for the front glass, would have a curtain in front of it, and the curtain would provide the information for the exhibition. So here you see the curtain being made, and you kind of see how big it is. All the type is this kind of like white velvety stuff, so it had to be ironed onto the curtain. And then after it was ironed onto the curtain, the students kind of helped set up the curtains. With this exhibition, we were also asked to do an exhibition catalog. And so as part of the catalog, we needed to shoot these scale models in a certain way. So we had this vision that these models be kind of like floating in space on black. And so this is the photographer kind of like putting a measure on the ground to know how far away from the building he would shoot them. And then this is what it looked like after he shot the photo. So you see it's like super straight and geometric. This is the book itself. It's using the same exact paper as what the paper models are made out of. And we like this idea of trying to kind of like make the book, kind of constructed just like the models. So you see, the typical things like the corners and the spine thing. And the inside was, again, MOS typography, which is kind of all one size, straightforward, kind of really easy. Each of the houses was documented with a kind of nice black and white photo as well as with a plan drawing. And then this was kind of the index. Okay, so the last project I'm going to talk about is a book for Tyler Mitchell. Tyler Mitchell is this kind of phenomenal photographer, very young. Perhaps he's kind of most well known for being the first black photographer to shoot a cover of Vogue. So here, this was the cover he shot with Beyonce. So Tyler had a really big show at the ICP, which is a photography museum here. And so the show was called I Can Make You Feel Good. So maybe a few months before the show happened, we started working on this kind of first photo monograph book. This is the book. A couple kind of thoughts as we were making the book. We wanted it to kind of be the sort of almost like the anti-photo book. By that I mean almost every photo book that we were seeing was kind of like a glossy cover with like coated paper on the inside, sort of heavy, just kind of very kind of standard looking and feeling. So for all the kind of material choices for Tyler's book, we went with entirely uncoated paper. So it's this kind of bulky Munkin Polar paper. And then the cover is cloth, it's a printed cloth. And then we also introduced this kind of ribbon as the carrier of the title of the book. So so when the ribbon is not facing outwards, you just see a pure image. So there's no type on the cover of the book. The spine kind of like mimics the ribbon. These are some close-ups of the printed cloth. This is how you enter the book. Tyler has an amazing statement here right as you enter the book. And then you see the book has no end papers. That's the book cloth wrapping around a kind of board. Another thing about the book was that there is no white space in the book. Every surface is printed. Tyler's work is very lush and very colorful, and so we wanted to kind of make sure this book retained that aspect. So again, nothing is left white in the book. Every surface is printed. Vertical images were always faced with a detail of that image. So you see here like kind of blow up of the kind of metal behind the models. So the book was published by Prestel, who are a kind of mass publisher of books. They're considered a really big publisher. So when you're working with a mass publisher, there's often a lot of constraints. So number one is there's always like a pretty tight budget. I would say like really extremely tight budget. And then there's issues like quantity. I think 7,000 were printed for the first run. So you're often limited in terms of like what you can do, not only because of budget, but kind of like time restraints. So with this ribbon, we had to make like a lot of different mock-ups to even test whether this ribbon would function properly. So what you see here are kind of like paper mock-up tests of the ribbon. And then all of that stuff kind of worked out, and then what you see here is the kind of first print test for the cover. So we were also worried about the print quality on cloth. So this is like a print test where we're all quite happy. And then this is a ribbon test. And then we're just kind of like putting them next to each other to imagine the book, making sure that it's going to be right. This book has a lot of like really small details that are unusual for like a big kind of production run from a big publisher. So you see there's no end papers. The cover itself, it's these kind of like two boards without a real spine. So the cloth is adhering directly to the book block, and then there's two boards on the outside that serve as covers. And then the image on the right shows how this kind of book ribbon is actually glued to the inside back cover. So this is, usually book ribbons are glued to the book spine. And in this case, we asked, the publisher to kind of, really, allow us to see if this will work, and ultimately it works, so we were happy. So as the book was coming out, Tyler wanted to make a kind of special edition for the book. And so the idea for the special edition was really kind of add in Tyler's personal thoughts and just kind of give the book another voice, like another textual voice, to kind of further a kind of like behind the scenes thoughts straight from Tyler about the book. So this is a book, a clamshell box for the book, and so the type is this kind of like stream of consciousness from Tyler, this text that are all kind of like personal, important things to him, people or things or phrases. And then as part of this special edition, we printed these smaller booklets. And these booklets have a personal thought or anecdote about every image from the book. So sometimes Tyler's talking about what is actually happening at each of the shoots, his personal thoughts on the images, which I was really, it was really interesting to read his thoughts. So for this little booklet, we went back to the newspaper press to print them, and I can never get enough of how this machine works. It's just so insane. So what we really liked about the newspaper press is this kind of rough quality that is inherent to the process. So these images become kind of like sort of rough. The booklets are on a really thin newsprint material, so it added this kind of like different texture to the book, the special edition box package. This is a close-up of like the box when it's opened. It came with this like USB stick of like things, digital files that Tyler wanted to share. Tyler also wanted to make a kind of website to directly sell these special editions, so we made that for him. And then because of like social media nowadays, these books have this kind of like additional life that you can continue following, which I find so entertaining. Just kind of this idea that like after the book comes out, there's like a book signing, there's promotional events, there's et cetera, and you can always follow them through good old Instagram, and it's so fun to see how this book goes out into the world, how it really affects people. Just kind of so fun and so encouraging to see this thing live in the world. Whereas like 10 years ago, maybe you design the book and you don't really know how it affects people. Nowadays it's like so I'm ending off here. So obviously Studio LIN is not just me. I work with incredibly amazing designers. So currently Stephanie Tam is working from California, and then Jenna, Sharon, Nicholas, Ben, and Yang. I've worked closely over the years, and incredible designers. Love their work. But thanks to everyone, and that's it. So I think I'll answer questions. Okay, how important is the material choice and print technique for your editorial work? It's as important as the typeface or the layout or whatever. Like I think we look at these things as nothing is more important than anything else. The binding is as important as the layout. The paper is as important as the typeface. Like it all needs to work together. So for example, like, if the image is like super slick or like commercial, maybe you want to print it on something like a rougher material, or I don't know, something like that. Would you say that New York City is a great city for young designers? I don't know. I haven't been a young designer for a long time, so I would say there's definitely a lot of good design studios here. It's extreme. I would say it's like extremely competitive. Often I find that like Studio LIN is up against the same 4 or 5 different studios, all in New York for a lot of different projects. So it's highly competitive. And it's also interesting that I find that there's a lot of interest from Europe, people wanting to come to New York. And it's funny because us in New York, we're often looking to Europe for inspiration. So, I mean, it's just funny that happens. What is it like to live in New York during the pandemic? I don't know. I mean, the pandemic's been happening for so long that I think, in a sense, we're all getting accustomed to, wearing masks and staying away from other people, and, not eating in restaurants, avoiding other people. So, I don't know, it's been kind of the same. I haven't really lived anywhere else, so it's hard to say how it compares. Any other questions? A lot of different designers inspire me. I think that the people that I work with are constantly inspiring me. Other inspirations. I really like OKRM's work. I really like Jeff Hahn's work. Did you study graphic design in New York City? No, I went to undergrad. Okay, the question was, did you study graphic design in New York City? I went to undergrad in Philadelphia, and then I went to Yale for grad school. So no, I didn't. If there's no more questions, any more questions? Okay. So thanks so much again, Katie Lounge, for having me, and I'm signing off from New York.